All right, welcome everyone to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen. This is sponsored by Stellar Labs. Super excited to have Vanessa Hung here. Vanessa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invite. I'm really excited.
Cool. Well, Vanessa, as we jump in, our first question for all of our guests is, why would an e-commerce seller who's interested in monetizing their mental capital be interested in connecting with you?
Such an interesting question. I think I'll say that I've specialized in the Amazon e-commerce world in a very specific area, what I like to call the unsexy stuff, which are more the operational, tedious, time-consuming work that requires you to, or the account requires, or anything in the business requires for you to have success. So we know a lot about how to grow brands and do all of the sexy stuff, the branding and PPC and advertising and marketing and influencers. I think that's great. Like, no discredit to that area, but also it's as important or even more important to build a proper foundation of the things that you don't see necessarily as the forefront of a lot of content. And that's what I specialize on. So my expertise, the unsexy stuff, operational, a lot of the backend work that needs to be done, things that will potentially help anybody hearing this to either delegate better or find smarter ways to optimize for efficiency. And that's the keyword. Like, efficiency is what we strive for. And a lot of people don't really look into that area because they go after the fancy, super shiny objects, which are that other areas.
Got it. So the unsexy stuff. And I
Yeah.
love, so you use the word delegate. I am a huge fan of delegate. I'm actually in the process of writing a book called Automate, Delegate, Eliminate, which is a term that I coined when I was on a podcast back when I was one of the very first companies out there to start a digital operations organization. All we did all day long, and they still exist, dataautomation.com built automations for people. And so I kind of
Mm.
follow that pathway: automate, delegate, eliminate. So delegation is one of my passions and something I failed at miserably for a long time and had to learn the right way to go about it. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about, you know, where what your journey looked like in delegation. As we get into that journey, my first question is this: when is the first time that you can remember monetizing mental capital in your journey? And I've had people say everything from
Okay.
like lemonade stands to all sorts of other stuff.
No, I have the perfect example for this, and it's so funny. This is a story that lived in my heart because my grandparents, so I grew up back in Caracas, Venezuela, and my grandparents had a massive house. We're talking massive, 16 bedroom type of thing, like crazy. And my grandpa, he was a writer. He used to own a bookstore and many, many other things and accomplishments, but he had books everywhere. So anywhere you look in the house, any corner, there was a book or some sort of curious, interesting artifact. And I've been curious my whole life to the point it's like at that stage in my life when I was little, my grandma or my uncles and aunts were like, oh yeah, Vanessa is everywhere all the time, like looking into things. She doesn't like, she shouldn't supposed to do that, but I'm like, okay, whatever. I want to see what's in that drawer or in that closet or in that thing or everywhere. So there was a time where my grandpa started forgetting about things. He's like, oh my God, where did I put that yellow book? And then he started paying me to find stuff in the house for him. So it's so funny because we were at dinner one time and he's like, damn, I remember I have this little thing and this booklet that is red and I'm reading it because I'm writing a book about that thing. I don't know where I left it. And I'm like, don't worry. Da, 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 da. 2 minutes later, I'm like, no, that was in the front whatever, chair by the door next to the whatever. So in my mind, I always have this good memory of memorizing like the space in a room and where things are, and I was just curious. Like for me, that environment was so rich and I was always absorbing information. It was never like, when you go through a place and you don't even notice things around you, I always notice. I'm very observant. So my grandpa used to pay me for observing. So that was fantastic side hustle. I didn't have to do pretty much anything, just
Pay
asking.
attention.
Sometimes it was, yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's like, oh, did you miss something today? It's like, it's been quiet lately, this business. Like, is it something missing?
You aren't missing anything
So,
right now, are you, Grandpa? Because I'd like a
yeah.
little extra spending money and let's get out there. I love that. I think that we all kind of can remember times when even my daughter, for example, we have her work on different things in the house and she's got her chores and then she's got extra stuff and we pay her for those extra chores. And so I totally get what you're talking about in terms of just this idea of creating that first side hustle. So I'm curious, did you ever involve a concept of delegation in that side hustle
Not
from a
at all.
standpoint of like
No,
no siblings? Like you were like, all right, grandpa's gonna pay me $5 and I'm gonna pay you $3 to go find X, Y, or Z.
no, it wasn't a business model that way. Like we had a pretty incredible relationship, and it was more like a fun thing between us. It
Mm,
wasn't never
mm.
like this is a business. Like I think that started first, probably the finding stuff, but then in school, I grew up in Venezuela. It's very close to the Caribbean, but then it's still a mountain city. And sometimes in the summer it gets warm, but warm is like, I don't know, 60, no, sorry, 79. That's warm, right? That was too hot. I used to sell paper fans,
Oh, paper fans. Yeah.
with paper you fold and then you create a paper fan. I started doing that in school. And it's just, this is the most ridiculous business that I ever created because it's like my friends had access to paper too. Like, but I was doing it and they were paying me. And for that, I did have some other friends that were helping me like fold it quick because the demand was pretty high. So then like I kind of delegated in the beginning. But then that went away. I think delegation wasn't a big thing in my entrepreneurship journey until I think pretty much founded the agency, because in the gap, like been doing business like since I was very little, like things and things and things, and it was always like me doing the stuff. Like I like to build it, put it together, sell it. So I was doing all of the pieces. I didn't understand delegation until much later in life.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, what part of your entrepreneurial journey had you at a point where you were like, oh, I had better learn to delegate or this is not going to work?
Yeah. So I started in this world, in this industry, as an e-commerce manager for a company that had retail stores, right? So at one point, that got pretty boring, right? Like I was doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start out like doing this for other people because other people have more interesting things. I kind of hit a plateau in that learning curve. Like I like to learn. I like to always experiment and learn new things. If not, I'll get bored. So then I start consulting and freelancing. One client, two clients, three clients. And when it hit to a point where it's like, okay, there is a lot of people that need this kind of backend help, I had to hire somebody. So my first hire was actually a designer to create content because I was spending, I don't know, maybe 50% of my time
Mm,
creating content in social media. So, and that's how I made my name in the beginning. Like people
mm,
didn't know who Vanessa was, but they knew the account that I was posting from. It was called Full Time Amazon back then. So in full-time Amazon, I used to post like a bunch of content, SOPs, stuff like that. I was even doing like long form written pieces in Medium. which is a blog post like platform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was like, okay, I need to delegate this somehow. So that designer also was kind of helping me with the copywriting. Then I realized that she wasn't a copywriter, so I had to, had somebody for that. I hired a copywriter, and then I hired my first assistant. And it was
Mm.
pretty much like hiring an executive assistant, but then she started doing like account manager type of work, like handling cases and doing stuff with my direction, of course, but helping with a lot of the backlog that I had. And then, the rest is history. I started like, well, the next person, and then the next person, I need this person. So in that sense, now I'm pretty happy right now with the position that I have, because in the agency, I was able to build a team that is pretty much sufficient, self-sufficient. So they don't need me for a lot of things. Actually, sometimes I feel that I bother them when I get into their stuff, like, but that's what it helps me to learn. So I'm always like going into their meetings and say like, hey, what's wrong? What's happening? What's changing? So we discuss a bunch of things, because that's the way you keep yourself fresh, especially in this industry. I think if I had like a landscaping business, I wouldn't care. I'll be doing whatever else. But Amazon changes so often that if you step out for a long time, then you are completely obsolete, and the things you knew before are not the reality right now. So one thing for anybody listening, this is what's going to happen to your business if you don't keep an eye or on top of certain things. And probably not on an operational side for some sellers, because you shouldn't know the little policy changes. But because Amazon makes those policy changes, your profitability will change. So let's say that you, as a business owner, start delegating and build an amazing team.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say 2023, you did that, and then 2024, at the end of the year, you see profitability, it would be completely different. And not necessarily because you're doing something wrong, but because Amazon changed in a way that the numbers are not the same, and profitability is not the same. So if you're not aware of those changes, then you won't be able to change strategy faster, and that will impact you. So in that way, I believe in this business particularly, if you don't have somebody on top of that part of changes, either you delegate it to somebody very high level, or you as the business owner are on top of those things, then it's a risk, it's a liability.
So tell me, and I want to kind of reel back to the beginning of your delegation journey. I totally agree there are some serious pitfalls in, getting out of touch with your business and connecting those different dots. Help me understand just a little bit more about what you guys do. So, Vanessa, is your company a company that will come in and find all of the backend people by like bringing on virtual assistants or that sort of different thing, or what parts does your company help with?
No, we will do all of the back end work. We have specialized in very high end issues. So things that will require you to open a case with seller support. And probably you already did, or somebody in your team already did. And that case or that issue is not getting solved. This is where we come in, and this is where we're experts. So our clients are coming for specific projects. So it could be like, hey, can you help me change my title, or can you help me remove this? So one case that's interesting, we were working on like that, like on a case like that last week, was somebody had inventory that they sent to FBA, and it seems that it's stuck because there is in reserve for a long time. It's been over 3 months. So they're paying for storage, and that inventory is not moving. It's not accounting for the inventory they have. So it's kind of like, what's happening? We need to figure it out. So we figure those things out. And also, create anything that you need for the account in the backend in Seller Central that is not PPC. So we don't touch PPC. We're not PPC experts, but anything else in the catalog, optimization. So right now, my big focus or the thing that I'm learning to implement it in the business and then offer it as a service is optimizing for AI. So I don't know if you've seen that Amazon now has a AI shopping assistant. And
Hmm.
with that shopping assistant, the type of questions and content that you need to have in your listing is completely different from the old model of keyword based like ranking and indexation. So, I'm testing that out, building the flow to make it to a point where we can start offering that service. So it's anything backend. So we are Amazon
Got it.
experts in that sense.
Got it. So as you began your journey, it sounds like you were doing the e-commerce manager thing, you got bored with that, and you looked at it and said, you know what? I'm gonna go do this for myself, and I'm gonna go help other people as a consultant. And then it sounds like you got overwhelmed by the number of people who needed your help, and so you needed to clone yourself.
Basically. Yeah.
What was the first mistake you made as a delegator? Do you remember?
Yeah. I mean, and I feel that sometimes there is some halo effect to that. Like that happened a long time ago, but I still think that I have some part of it, which is thinking or expecting that the people that are hiring are me. That is the biggest mistake.
Mm,
They're not you. And that's the thing. It's like they are their own person with their own interests, needs, wants, desires, and objective. Expecting them to think like you or do the things like you, it's pretty inefficient, I guess. This is where you, as a leader, need to start understanding your team. And obviously, like, you don't settle, like, if you want to have a specific role, a specific type of person, you look for that, right? But
yeah.
you don't expect that they learn or they do the work the same way you do it, or even see the world the same way you do it. And that's something that it was surprising in one way of like, oh wow, there's actually a different perspective to the same issue. But to me it was like, why can you like how come you don't understand this? That was
Yeah.
my frustration in
Why
the
can't you do
beginning.
this just like me?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm telling you the step by step, and this is what I learned, which is the most difficult part of delegation, I think. When you delegate something and you say do A, B, C, but you don't explain why they're doing A, why A is before C, and why B is in the middle. Like when you don't explain those connections, you're just you're gonna fail at building a successful team unless you just want people like clicking a button like very automatically. In my world, I cannot have people like that. So I need them to have critical thinking. It's very important for me and the agency for them to know what is going on and why that's happening. So in
So
that sense, yeah.
real quick, so why do you think it is? Because I actually agree with you. I think that my first time delegating, just to give you an idea of how bad I was at delegating, we hired an assistant for me. This is when I was working at data automation. I was building an automation agency. All we were doing all day long was automating stuff for people. And my assistant, I left a note for her, and I think it was like an invoice or something like that. And I set it on her desk and asked her to like transcribe it or put it into the computer in some way. And put a sticky note on it and put it back on my desk and said, Will, you could have done this in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness, I have failed at my job here in terms of like outlining, roles and responsibilities and connecting all of those different dots. It was just like obvious, like this is not syncing up in terms of the who's doing what or how this should be done. Why is
Yeah.
it? And I think part of my problem was exactly that. I saw her just like me. I was like, she's going to approach these things like I would approach them. And I didn't see that there could be a different perspective or different lots of that. Why do you think entrepreneurs at the beginning of their delegation or scaling in to create a system that can monetize mental capital? Why do you think that is a challenge? Why do you think it's a challenge to not see or understand those things?
I believe the primary, at least in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, is that I truly, truly was not aware of the fact that people don't think like me. And for a long time, I struggled with that until I realized that is actually my superpower, in the sense of like, you
Mm,
actually are pretty special. So in that sense, trying to, and most times I'll say, when you find people that think like you and are like you, they probably don't want to be your employees. So, that's something that you need to consider. So then you're looking to partnering or doing something else. But I believe that was the main reason. For me, it was I struggled with it to a point that I'm like, I'm going to therapy and I was sharing this with my therapist and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And she's like, what is that you don't get? It's like, how come this is not happening? And she's like, well, Vanessa, there's only one of you in the world. You cannot expect people. And I don't necessarily think this is about a training. It wasn't a training thing. It was a desire, that sense of curiosity that I told you at the beginning. Like I'm so curious about things in life in general that it's like I never stop, right? And some people will stop the moment they don't have an incentive. So, they can be great at one role. And this is something that I struggle with my higher level managers. It's like I would love them to keep growing and keep expanding and keep doing stuff. And they just chill. They're like good. They do the work, they're fantastic, but it's not that they're reaching for more. And this is where I fail at thinking they want more. They don't,
yeah,
right? So in delegation or in team building, that's actually something you need. Like if
yeah.
if everybody
You
is
need
like you,
people. Yeah, you
yeah,
need people to be willing to go with the status quo. Super quick anecdote. You mentioned this idea that, if they're just like you, then they probably don't want to be your employee. Have you run into that before? Have you found people who
yeah.
you brought onto your team who were just like you and you were like, oh, wow, yeah,
I've never I luckily I was never to the point where I hire them, but at one point I remember I was looking for somebody to help me as an account manager, and I had a lead from a friend back in Venezuela. So I hire in Latin America. All of my hires are in Latin America, and this friend, so it's a friend of my friend, right? So we had a call, fantastic background, like great English, very technical, right off college or university. And at one point, this guy in the call says, like, well, Vanessa, yeah, I'm interested in that because, this thing is like, you scratch my back, I scratched your back. And I was like, no, bro, this is not how it works. Like, I'm hiring you as an account manager and you're going to work for me, right? I'm not going to scratch your back. Like, that idea of like, he came in with an idea of like, oh, yeah, I'm super eager, I'm super hungry, let's partner up. That wasn't the right moment for me, at least. I wasn't looking for a partner, but came with this initiative, which I love. Like at the beginning, I was like, I need somebody like that in my team. And then I realized, like, no, not really. And then I had some people in the team that were part of the team, and they're like, oh, no, you know what? I can do this agency myself. And I'm like, the door is over there. Please be my guest. Like sometimes people that they don't really know what it takes to build a company. So when these type of things happen, it's just like, okay, off you go.
yeah,
Like
good luck.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
So
Vanessa, your story, I too have had that experience. I don't know if you use, so I about, oh, let me back up just a little bit here. So 2 years ago, two and a half, oh no, 3.5 years ago, I dove into trying to figure out how to clone myself. because I was trying to figure out as a busy entrepreneur, like how do I get out there and get more people to connect those dots? And I started bringing on what I called apprentices. In my journey, I thought that's what I needed was just a clone. I thought, okay, I just need a clone. I just need somebody to come in here and handle this process. And I started using the Colby test, Kolbe. It's an
Mhm.
amazing test that tests on modus.
Personality test.
It's kind of a personality test. It's actually, so she actually calls it a modus operandi test, which basically in layman's term means the way that you handle work. So instead
Okay.
of like a personality, so like the base root of what's there, it's more about like what are the things in your work that give you energy? Do
Mm.
you like taking risks? Do you hate taking risks? Do you love interruptions? Do you hate interruptions? Are you the kind of type of person who wants it more ambiguous and wants to just kind of figure stuff out? Or are you the kind of person who loves all the detail? Those are kind of the different lanes that the Colby test measures. And I found that, and it reminds me actually of the Working Genius test by Patrick Lencioni. He's got a book called The Six Working Geniuses. It's another really good one for finding your opposite or finding someone who
Mm.
complements you instead of finding someone who's exactly the same as you. So in my journey, as I began to kind of pick apart this process of looking at this as like, okay, I need a clone. I need someone who's exactly like me. My score in the Colby test, so if you ever take the Colby test and you want to compare, my score is 2, 2, 10, 4. 2 in Fact Finder, which means I love ambiguity. I hate like
Mm.
looking up all the nitty gritty details, not my thing. The second one is follow through, and that's it's also a 2 there. And that means that I love interruptions and I'm not likely to systemize things ever. Like that's just not systemizing things is not my favorite thing to do. And then
Okay.
10 for my third score, that's a quick start. That's I dive off the cliff. I'm the guy who's literally I've completely didn't look for sharp rocks at the bottom. I just dove off the cliff. I like taking risks. And then the last score is the implementer score, and that's how you organize physical space. Like, can you take physical space and put it in your brain? Are you better with your hands, better with your brain? So I'm kind of a mid range there.
So again, what was it? Two,
The
two?
Colby K 2 2 10 4.
I'm 6383.
6383. Okay, love it. So you come in you're kind of a mid slash you can flex high on the fact finders thing. So you like detail, but you're probably comfortable with less detail than the people who are on the 7, 8, or 9, or even 10. I haven't met a 10 fact finder yet. I've met a
Okay.
9 and an 8 and a 7. I haven't met any 10s. They're the guys who need all the details before they get started. That's kind of their MO. And so I would
Yeah.
guess that sometimes you need all the details, but sometimes you're able to do it without having all the details. Is
Yeah.
that okay? And then
Yeah.
your follow through, you said 3, right? 7,
Three.
3, 3.
Yeah.
So if you're a 3, that means that you actually really enjoy interruptions. Like if somebody like, it's new
Oh,
variety. Whoa,
yeah.
this is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
100%.
same thing over and over again, not your favorite cup of tea. Exactly. So that's the follow through. So like Vanessa, you would actually make a really terrible assistant from that perspective because you would
Horrible.
systemize the email and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored. I can't see straight. But I'm sure you've brought in team members who balance you in that arena. And you said the fourth one was
8.
8.
Quick
So
start.
or the third one, quick start. So that means you're very similar to me. And we tend to take lots of risks and like
Yeah.
we're like jumping off of cliffs and getting excited about all the different things sometimes before we've looked at all the details or looked at all the things that we probably should have looked at. Yeah, to get it.
100%.
Love it. And what was the last one?
3, 2.
3 as well. So
Terrible
that,
implementer.
yeah. So the implementer score is interesting because in the digital space, in the space that we live and thrive in this world of virtual working from home and all of that, I find that the implementer score is not as important. It does not reflect as much. Honestly, if I found somebody who had a super high implementer score, I might actually
Hmm.
be worried that they wouldn't like the job from a computer because they like working with their hands so much. Is
Interesting. I will say, as a solo entrepreneur, like solo founder,
mm-hmm,
I always find myself, which is which is, I think, is one of my superpowers, is impressive. It's like I'm a really good implementer, but it takes so much energy. Like it's at a point where it's like pouring my soul into this implementation. I
Hmm.
get it out and I'm exhausted. Like, don't talk to me for 3 days because I'm
Hmm.
exhausted. Versus where I'm creating stuff, like starting and creating and strategizing and all of that,
Yep.
this is what fuels me. But
Hmm.
I didn't have a choice. Like it's not like
Yep.
I will say like I'm not gonna implement anything, because if I say that, then I wouldn't have a business, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I think there is a natural tendency. It's my
Yep.
creative tendency,
Yep.
but I've trained myself to be an integrator or an implementer because that's what the business needed. So, yeah, I think this is one thing where I will say for anybody listening that ever get this type of score or know what are their tendencies, having a tendency is one thing, that's not your destiny, which it's sometimes a lot what I saw in my environment growing up. I
Hmm.
had a lot of creators and entrepreneurs like that love to talk about ideas, or I
Hmm.
should say entrepreneurs that love to talk about ideas. I'm
Yep.
gonna start, I'm gonna start, I'm gonna
Wantrepreneurs.
start
So
it.
many wantrepreneurs.
Yes, like I'm gonna start it, but then it's like, oh, I don't know how to implement, or I
Well,
am that's not me,
so
or I don't know the my partner that will implement the things. Like that's an excuse, to be honest.
So, Vanessa, I totally agree with you. And the Colby test is about what gives you energy and what sucks you dry. So, it doesn't mean that I can't do boring things or that I can't do detail-oriented things or that I can't systemize things, because I've had to figure out how to become that person who can do those things. And as I began to continue to push into my journey and understand what I can and can't do, again, at the beginning, I was looking for a clone. I thought that's
Mm,
what I need. I need a clone. I found a guy, interviewed him while he was still in college, and he was within one point of me. I think he was a 9 on the quick start instead of a 10. And
okay.
I said, I mean, congrats, I'm you in 10 years. Why don't you join my team and we'll rule the world? Like join me and together we'll rule the universe. And he said, I don't need you. I said,
Mm.
excuse me? He said, I don't need you. And I was like, what do you mean you don't need me? I am you in 10 years, dude. Like I'm you. Come join me and I will help you figure out all the things that you didn't know how to do. And he goes, yeah, I don't need you. Thanks for the offer though. And I got off
Interesting.
the phone and I was like, wait, how I don't how and then I stopped and I thought, wait a second, I think I probably would have said the same thing
Yeah.
when I was in college. Too arrogant to even recognize that I needed anything. And between that and several other experiences, I began to hire more apprentices. I found that the
Mm.
ones that worked the best were actually my opposite. They were those who could lean into some of those categories of things that I was naturally not great at. And so that
Yeah.
wasn't that I couldn't lean in and teach them, because I had to learn myself how to handle some of those situations. But I found that my opposite was really what I needed. And obviously, that's going to be different in different categories. Like you said, your first hire was a designer. Well, in
Yeah.
that situation, I bet you did have to find somebody who was a little bit more like you, who got energy from creation, right? So I think a lot of it,
Yeah.
you've got to understand that. But they had to be different enough from you that they didn't want to go build their own company 3 months out the gate. They wanted to lean in with you.
Yeah. Also, that's where I guess we're talking about hiring high level people, like, managers and directors and stuff like that. But to the designer point, I hire her because of a specific skill set. And that's where this is one thing about hiring actually came back to me. When I started the agency, I started hiring from the bottom up, meaning I started hiring the little people, like the little task that I needed, a copywriter, a designer, a person to look at my emails, a person to log in. Like, then I realized that, like, why I'm not growing, like, why is this so difficult? I don't really love like managing teams. And that's when I start bringing in people that were more managers, high level leaders that can lead them. So I started hiring then from the top to bottom. Top, yeah.
Hmm.
So it's like high level people that then they will tell me whether they need a copywriter or not. I'm not the one deciding to do that. So that's one thing that's very important, and I believe a lot of people think, or that when they think about delegation, they think about hiring the bottom. So the person to delegate my emails, the person to delegate my mark or copywriter, my person to do my laundry, or my, those all things, instead of saying like, you know what, I'm going to hire an operational manager that will build a team that is efficient for where I want to go. And to me, that was a breaking point in my business, in revenue, and also in people, in talent, where I said like, I'm going to lean into my managers, my leaders that see the vision, and then tell me who they need and why they need it, and when they need it. It's not the same thing, and it creates a lot of issue when you start bringing those higher people, and then you have another infrastructure on another organization that is very, I guess, set in your company, and it's like, no, 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 break it, break whatever you need. Like, I did this out of ignorance. So that's interesting to think
Interesting.
about. And it's a mistake that I see a lot of sellers doing, when they see like, oh well, but I'm just gonna hire a brand manager. This is the funniest thing. I meet with a lot of sellers, and they're like, oh well, but I will hire a brand manager. So they go out there, go to hiring VAs in the Philippines or in India, or somewhere where it's cheaper than the US, obviously, and they think that a brand manager is a VA with experience in Seller Central. And let me correct this. That's not a brand manager. You need to understand the
Sorry.
definition. Yeah,
Oh
you need
my
to understand the
gosh.
definition. Brand manager, it's focused on growing your business. It's invested in the top line, how you sell more, develop more products and stuff like that. A brand manager is not the VA that is listing products in your store. It's not the VA doing flat files. It's not the VA creating the shipments. So completely different people. And because some of those VAs like to be called brand managers, and they put that in their resume or in their profile,
Yep.
some sellers say like, oh yeah, I have a great brand manager. It's like, no, dude, you have a VA that has 2 years of experience in Seller Central. It's not the same, you know.
So
And I
so
think
tell me what if I'm an Amazon seller, or if I'm just beginning my journey in monetizing mental capital, what should I be delegating first?
it depends what sucks your energy. Like, if it's horrible. So I remember at one point I worked with a big wholesaler. So he was a very operational type of guy. Like, he loved the Google Sheets and make sense of the data and the numbers and looking at the things and finding gaps in the data. He was doing wholesale at a time, and he hated to talk to wholesalers, distributors, like talking to them and say like, hey, can you sell me this and that? So his first hire, well, not the first, but one of the hires that he made in his company was a guy to do exactly that. It was a salesperson that was meant to call distributors and sell them, and to selling them, right? Selling to the company. So
Hmm.
he hired his weaknesses, right? Like, he hired that thing that he dread. It was bad. I remember seeing him, and he was like, this is the most frustrating thing about this work. But then on an operational side, it's like, how can we make this more efficient, more profitable, more this, more that? He was amazing. So if you're the type of person that is listening to this, that love to talk, that also, I think one part of the entrepreneurship journey is that you will succeed faster if you know yourself better, and sooner. Like, if you know really who you are, instead of pretending be Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, and like, if you're the type of guy that likes, or gal that likes to wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, and then meditate, and then journal, and then build a company, fantastic, like more power to you. But if you're not that person, don't try to be that person. Get real, right? Like if you're more like an 11 a.m. type of person, that's fine. Like there's people building companies that way. Don't be ashamed of it. But then hire your weaknesses. If you
Mm-hmm.
need to be if your team or your company needs to be online at 8, then you find a VA that is online at 8 until you wake up, right? Like that to me is one of my realizations where it's like if I knew this when I started,
Mm-hmm.
I would have avoided a lot of mistakes because I was trying to be somebody and build the company based on the experience of others and what others told me. And that's one true thing. Like I was part of a community back in South Florida, an amazing community with source of income. And a lot of people there had their own business and they were like, oh no, I hired this. And no, they start saying like, no, you need to hire this person and that person, and you need to have, and I'm like, I did some, and then it was a disaster. I didn't need them. Why? Because I
Mm.
like to do that part. Then you need
Yeah.
to know yourself to know what is that you need to hire actually.
So, Vanessa, if you could make a phone call back to the paper fan Vanessa, back to
Mm,
she's in school, she's even hired a friend because the demand was so high for the paper fans. If
yeah.
you could give her a phone call, and we're assuming she's mature enough to receive a piece of advice from you and bring it forward to today that might help her monetize her mental capital more efficiently or more effectively, what would you tell her to do? What would you tell her? What piece of advice would you give her?
I think that I'll go back to telling her how much the things that she likes to do and she knows what to do are worth, and why that is not, or what that is not common, because that got me to do a bunch of amazing stuff. So for a long time, I was thinking that I was like another one, another number in a bunch of people. And then I realized, like, no, you actually are different. And, you get to use your gifts in a very special way if you decide to. So, starting sooner, I think, like, to realize that, because I started like long time ago, but to realize that that idea of selling paper fans to my friends
Mhm.
wasn't just like a thing, an opportunistic thing. There was something there that I saw a demand or a gap in the market and I took it. It's like it's a risk. I took the risk and I did it. I didn't know that until much later where I'm like, oh, I actually feel that I can build something, and don't compare your journey to other people. That type of things, like
Yeah,
understanding your superpower and seeing that I think will be my piece of advice to her.
discover your superpower as quickly as possible and lean into it. I love it. I love it.
Exactly.
All right, final part of our episode here. I have two more questions for you. One, I'm going to give you a scenario where you step into an elevator and the person next to you says, yeah, I'm an eight-figure Amazon seller. What do you do? So you're going to be able to give them what does Vanessa's company do? What do you guys do? 60 seconds is all you've got for that. Then right after that, we're going to go to any tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you monetize your mental capital.
Okay.
Okay, ready? So we
Yeah.
just stepped into the elevator. Guy next to you turns and says, yeah, I'm an Amazon seller. What do you do?
Oh, that's amazing. I'm actually on an Amazon agency that helps sellers to operate their business more efficiently. So I'll say like, what do you do for operations? Do you have your own team? And then when I say, yeah, I have my own team, it's like, oh, well, we actually focus on leveraging, or sorry, supporting that team to be or to solve problems faster in Seller Central. So anything that requires you to solve a problem, we're there for you. And also, I'll say one thing that's interesting right now, it's getting into AI and optimizing in that world. I'm diving into it super deep. So if you wanna schedule a call and then hit me up, like I'm super interested and we're doing it right now for our clients. That's what I'll say.
Beautiful. So say that last part one more time. I think your internet may have blipped out, or maybe it was mine. So you were saying I'm getting super into AI, and then go
Oh,
say that part one more time.
yeah, getting into AI and how that is changing the way customers shop online, and also we build these things and sell to them. So we're optimizing stores and listings to that experience. So if you wanna, level up and actually target and tap into that area of the Amazon selling journey, let me know. Let's book a call, and that's what's interesting right now.
Cool. Last question. Tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you monetize your mental capital.
I think I like to read books. So one that I read recently that was pretty interesting as an entrepreneur, where you're like, what do you do with your money when you're not like building your company, is Psychology of Money. I don't remember the author on top of my head. I'm not really good with names, but Psychology of Money, it actually explains you what you need to do to invest, right? Like, and to save money, and why that is different for everybody, and why is a rational thing that we actually implement in an irrational way. It taught me a lot on what are the things I need to start thinking about when I think about investing money. It doesn't really give you any advice whether you should invest in cryptocurrencies or the stock market or bonds or things, nothing like that, but it's just a mental framework. So I really like to think about things in mental frameworks. A podcast that I'm really enjoying right now is the My First Million with Sam and Sean. Or those guys I find hilarious, and there is a lot of things that I have implemented out of their episodes that are insane. Like, especially in the AI area, a fantastic, fantastic podcast. And yeah, well, I think we said that we're going to talk about that, but one thing that I invested on was a professional studio in my house.
Yeah.
So if you are a person that is in calls with potential customers, with podcasters, with stuff, like the image online of you is so important. And I this hit me one time because I recorded a podcast with Norm Farrar. Pretty cool podcast. He was great. But then he started resharing it like small clips. And I was like, my camera sucks. This is horrible. My microphone is terrible. So I was like, there is no way my face is gonna go out in the internet and getting reshared with this quality. So if you are at any point capitalizing your content, make sure to be have a like a visual that is good enough to be worth sharing,
Mhm.
because it's important. It's your face in the internet, and you know that's the world,
So Vanessa,
basically.
you've just to end us out here, swap your background here real quick, just to show people like she's got a TV in her background, and she can
Yeah,
totally be like, poof, now it's something different. Poof, now it's something different.
yeah,
So just to show you, she's got a full-blown TV back there, lots of lights, pretty freaking cool stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, totally agree. Investing in your image there is powerful. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us on monetizing your mental capital.
Thank you so much for the invite.
All right, that's it for today.